What's up guys, it's Kristen here today with my September wrap-up. So September was a pretty good reading month, even though I didn't read as much as I normally do in a month. But two of the books that I read I would consider my favorites of the entire year, and I have finally now jumped onto the bandwagon of audiobooks and realizing how amazing they can be. I don't know why I had this like stigma in my mind that I just wouldn't like them, and now I can't get enough. I can barely drive somewhere without listening to one of my audiobooks. And the first book that I finished in September did also happen to be an audiobook. It was A Mother's Reckoning by Sue Klebold. I talked a little bit about this in my August wrap up, and I also did a full review, so I won't get too much into it here. But this is Sue Klebold's memoir, and she was the mother of Dylan Klebold, who was one of the Columbine shooters. This memoir just absolutely blew my mind and crushed my heart. It was so hard to hear about the things that Sue went through in the aftermath of not only losing her son, but knowing that he was responsible for the deaths of 13 other people, and all the while never being able to understand why Dylan did something like this. And it just gave such an interesting perspective where we never think about the suffering of the perpetrator's family, and also a lot of the book deals with mental health awareness, which I think is so important, and she tries to teach some of the lessons that she has learned through her experiences. This is one of the ones that I was talking about, is already one of my favorites of the entire year, and I definitely recommend listening to the audiobook as well, because Sue narrates it herself, and hearing her own story in her own words is very powerful. And again, I will link my full review of this down below. Next up, I read The Wonder by Emma Donoghue, and I was sent an advance copy of this by Little Brown, but it just came out a week or two ago. And this book is set in Ireland in the 1850s, and it surrounds this young 11-year-old girl who claims that she has been fasting for 4 months and living off nothing but manna from heaven. And so this nurse is brought in so that she can kind of keep watch over her day and night and prove or disprove, more likely, whether or not she is actually this miracle and that she hasn't eaten anything for 4 months. I was eagerly anticipating this, even though I haven't read Emma Donoghue's more famous book, Room. I have heard endless praise for it and I love the movie, but this book just fell short for me, and in that way that there were so many elements of a good story, so many things that I could have fallen in love with, the whole theme of religion and belief, and also she kind of briefly touches on Irish folklore and fairy tales, and whether or not this girl was actually telling the truth or not, and the nurse's doubt, but it just never came together for me with the writing, and all of the characters just felt very bland and flat to me, and there was a lot of telling you how they're feeling instead of showing you. So it just ended up being a rather blah, forgettable read for me, which was a huge disappointment, but can't win them all. Then I finally finished Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies by Jared Diamond. I started this back in August, and it's quite a chunky nonfiction read, so it's kind of one that you can dip in and out of, but basically he is going over the entire history of human civilization and essentially answering the question of why certain cultures did not develop at the same rate as other cultures, particularly the native cultures in most of the southern hemisphere versus the cultures of the northern hemisphere, and the pervasive racist notion for many centuries has been that they obviously just weren't as smart as their northern counterparts, and that is why they remained quote-unquote primitive as opposed to developing great civilizations. But Jared Diamond is just amazing at driving a stake through that theory and ripping it to shreds and showing that it was all based on the availability of resources, the geography of an area, and the kinds of plants and animals that were available. Those were the factors that determined the progress of a culture. It had absolutely nothing to do with IQ levels or intelligence, and also he never places any value on that one succeeded and the other one failed, which I think is very important. This is a book that I think should be on every high school history curriculum. It is that mind-blowing, and he makes it so simple and so clear though at the same time that you realize how could you not have understood this beforehand. And I am a lover of history and I still learned so many things reading this. It did get a little bit dry and repetitive at certain points, but I've also heard great things about the audiobook, so maybe if you're a little bit weary about getting into a dense non-fiction read, I would recommend checking that out. Then I listened to another audiobook this month that I absolutely fell in love with, and it was The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North, and again the narrator for the audiobook was just absolutely amazing. This is the story of a man named Harry August who was born in 1918, and he lives a rather ordinary life, but when he dies he is immediately reborn again in 1918 and remembers everything that happened in his past life, and this keeps happening over and over and over again. So it's this really interesting twist on immortality. You know, you think of how you could do something different in every lifetime and still have all that knowledge, but then of course the opposite side, that it could get quite boring and breed apathy because you know everything that's going to happen. But it was so interesting because he meets other people who have the same abilities, so to speak, as him, who live multiple lives, and they all have a different philosophy on what they should do with their multiple lives. And of course there's going to be great differences in opinions, and that breeds an adversary for Harry, who believes that he should meddle with time and change the events of history. And oh, give me a villain to fall in love with and I am there. And he creates this chase through time, so it feels like this great spy thriller adventure at the same time, and I honestly never knew where the story was heading, which honestly doesn't happen a lot for me with books, which is why this is one of my favorite books of the year. I was so sad when the audiobook was over. I did not want it to end. I've always had this weird obsession with time travel. Probably goes back to when I was obsessed with Back to the Future when I was a kid, and I might do a whole video on my favorite time travel books at some point in the future. And I am almost finished up with Matilda by Roald Dahl and very much enjoying it. I never read it as a kid. I find it funny though how in the book the kids seem to fight back against Trunchbull a lot more, which I kind of love. And it's a lot less scary though than the movie, which genuinely terrifies me at certain points. Lastly, I'm only about halfway through Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeline Thien. This was recently shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize, and I've been feeling though kind of slumpish the past week or so, so that's why I didn't end up finishing up in the month of September, so I will talk more about it in October, and maybe by then it will possibly have won the Man Booker, which would be really funny because the only Man Booker International that I read earlier in the year was The Vegetarian, and it ended up winning, so maybe this will be the one Man Booker that I will read that will end up winning. So that is it for my September reads. So please leave your thoughts in the comments down below if you've read any of these books or want to discuss them a little bit more. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!